In today's video, we will read data from file. So in the previous video, we managed to write data, uh, which was through this function which we created ourselves. So today we will read our data from the file. So let me show you my file. This is my file which we created in previous video. It has all this data. We are gonna read all this data in today's video. So I don't need this piece of code anymore since it was used for writing data. Or let's comment it for now. And let's create a new function which reads data. So let's do that. So uh, let's create a function. So it is gonna take nothing for now. So first I have to create an object of the file class. So make sure you have the same name so you can read the correct file, otherwise it will give you an error. And then in the last video we used the file writer class, but now we have to use the opposite of it, that is the file reader class, right? File reader, I'm gonna call it fin. Fin means simply means that now data is coming into our program. You can give it any name. It is for uh, better variable names or understanding. And here you simply have to pass the file object. And now it is giving us that the exception is not handled. Simply add try catch, and also also what we should do, we should declare this outside so it is accessible in our whole function. So let's declare it outside and let's initialize it to null. So I'm gonna remove this here. I will also need the Skinner class here, which I will show you why in a moment. I'm gonna call it S. The object will be called S. I've also initialized it to null, and I also need an array, right? So array. So as you can see in my file, I have a lot of numbers, right? I have a lot of data. So before printing this data, I want to read all my data into an array. So first, I will read all this data one by one, and I will store this data into an array. So then I will print it. So I need an array. So I'm gonna call it int numbers. You can give it any name, and I'm gonna give it a size of oh, now that's the tricky part, assigning the correct size. But uh, now what we can do, we must give it a size. So what you can do, you can give it a random size like 10, right? Like let's give it 100. So let's suppose we have 100 numbers, or you can change the size as well, or you can ask the user the size of array in advance, or you can use something else. And now it will read 100. So 100, it can store 100 numbers. Let's create two variables. One is called int I, which will be our index, and let's create another variable called count. So we know how many times, how many numbers have been read. It will help us in indexing, keeping track of the total numbers that were read. So now, uh, now I have used the fin class, a file reader class, but I also need another class to correctly read sequence of data. So this file reader reads one character at a time, but to read a full complete number or a complete data or complete string, I need buffered reader. So buffered reader is basically used to read a large chunk of text or data at once. So this is what I'm gonna be using now, and I'm gonna simply call it reader. You can obviously give it any name you want, and in the parentheses I must pass it the file reader object, and here we go. So now we got the buffer reader. Now what you have to do, link we have to link our reader with the scanner. So as you know, scanner is used to take input, but it can also be used to scan inputs. So I'm going to show you in a minute what I mean by that. So first let's simply pass this to the scanner object. So now we're going to create a scanner object, and we're going to pass it the reader, right? So remember, this is the same scanner class that we used earlier in our inputs. So now we have to use a do while loop. So I'm using do while loop because first I want to execute, then I want to check my condition. So you will see why. So my condition is while s dot has next int. So now what it is doing, it will check whether scan has next int. So it will see as long as file has any integer, it will keep on executing this loop. But as soon as the file doesn't have any integer next to the current number, it will exit. So this is the logic. That's why I'm using the do while loop, because first I want to execute the already existing number, the already number which, suppose we are on this 2 to 34. So first I will check whether the number already exists, and then I will read. Or in the another way you can look at this, first, for example here, first I will execute the number which is already present, and then I will what I will do, I will basically I what I will do, I will here first it will come here, it will see 952, and it will see it has 146 next to it. So therefore it will keep executing it. But you must use a do while loop, otherwise you are gonna miss the last integer, so, or actually the next integer. So I also need a temp variable to store my current data, right? So to I'm gonna use scan.next int. So what it is doing, it is s.next int, sorry, it is basically giving me the integer in the file. So first it will give me 952, then 146, then 234, and it will store it into the temp. So then I have to use the array. Now I have to add the red number into my array. So basically let's add this temp at so now temp is added. Now let's increment the index as well as count. So we must increment these values since they are compulsory for the logic we have used here. And this loop will exit as soon as there is no more number remaining in our program. And this is only for reading numbers. For text, you can simply replace this with next line, and here you can do the next line as well. You can add has next line here, and after reading this, we must close the file as well as the reader. So first let's create close the reader. So we have to add the try catch block again to handle the exception. And now we have handled the exception here. You can add your custom text here, and we also need to close the uh, let's say the scanner. It is not compulsory, but I'm doing it to prevent resource leak, and we also must close the file reader, right? So this is also closed, and now we have read the data. Now our job is to printing the data. So now we are gonna print our read data, our array. So normally we go from length minus 1, right? We start from 0, we go up to length minus 1. But here, I don't have a fixed size. If you already know how many numbers you have, you can use numbers dot length. But since I don't have this fixed size, therefore I'm going to use the count variable, since it has the total indexes uh, up to which my data is stored. So I'm going to be using the count index, and it will go up to less than equal to count. And here I'm going to simply print my data from the array. Print, let's say, oh, I have to initialize it to j since I have already used I. I'm going to print numbers I. And after this loop has done its execution, that is all numbers have been printed. And I'm going to simply inside a new line. So let's call our read data function here. Let's see what happens. So we got 0 0 0. Let's see why we're getting that. uh, One reason is that we have not added a space here, and I am printing the wrong variable, wrong index. I simply have to use the index. So you simply have to print your data. So let's run our program again, and as you can see, we got our data printed here. The only issue is that we must use less than count, since count is incremented, and instead of count we can completely remove count, since we already know that our I will be our last index, since it goes up to I, right? We already have I saved, so we can do less than I, since I is already saved. So now, as you can see, we are getting all our data printed here. And let me simply show you the file so you can compare our data. So as you can see, we got all these numbers: 943, 7, 704, 712, 287, 1137, and 123. So we got all these numbers printed here. Through this function, you can use a while loop to continuously print or read data simply through this logic. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.